welcome everybody to the 10th presentation of our camp. So the remaining 3 presentations are Q&As. It's our hope that the 5th speaker, Aaron, will join us tomorrow. That's based upon the assumption that he can, that all the technical things work. Let's open with a word of prayer. Holy God, we thank you for the blessings that you give and that we receive. Despite all the excitement and joy of this camp, we pause for a moment to acknowledge that this is the day of preparation. As much as this is the millennium of preparation, please guide and direct us as you lead us into heavenly places. In Jesus' name, Amen. So, I guess I'm going to do a bit of speaking, but it's going to be slightly interactive as well. I may ask some of the other speakers to answer some questions. They'll do that from the congregation, not from up front for this class, if they do say something. So, as has been observed and commented several times now, both in the form of studies, private and public conversations, and testimonies, including the 2 testimonies that we had this morning, we have approached the subject of the Sunday law in a very different fashion than the movement has dealt with issues in the past. The subject or the question regarding who and what represents the movement or how movement positions are established, for many of you seem to be in flux. They haven't been decided, they're still being worked out. So I understand people's concerns, their consternation, their worry. Some of the fears that you have are unfounded. Others are legitimate. I understand people's concerns. So the ones that are unfounded, you need to begin to look at things in a better way, in a proper way. The genuine concerns that are being raised, you need to work with us, with God really, so that we understand what God's will is for us. So, we all know the story of the 5 speakers, the issues that you've had dealing with various messages, and the criticism that I've received in not only allowing it to be handled this way, but I think for some people they view it that I've abandoned my responsibilities in some shape or form. I just see all of those emotions as growing pains. So these speakers, however they were selected, had very different ideas about the waymark that we call the Sunday law. And I thought it prudent, even correct, to take a different approach than we've done in the past. Because several points needed to be made. So they were left to teach and preach untrammeled anything that they wanted to. Once that work had been done, I asked them to come together and to try to understand what points we held in common and what points we disagreed with. So in order to do that, I asked two questions that you're all familiar with. Why is the Sunday law connected to an election? And why this election? That being 2024. I asked people in the movement that question, and most people weren't able to answer well. And that concerned me, that most people, in fact every person that I've spoken to in the movement, believes that the Sunday law is connected to this election, but they didn't know why. So we set to the task of trying to develop proofs or arguments of why this was the case. So I'm going to briefly go through those proofs that you've already heard.
Takže pôjdem trošku cez tieto pojmy, ktoré ste už počuli.
So first one, just in the order that I have them, is Daniel 6.
Ten prvý je Daniel 6, prvý dôkaz. Všetci poznáte príbeh.
And in order to use that chapter,
na to, aby ste počuli tú kapitolu, aby sme zodpovedali túto otázku, tak ako všetky príbehy, všetky príbehy, cez ktoré idete, musíte sa pýtať autora toho príbehu pravú otázku. Ak sa spýtate zlú otázku, dostanete zlú odpoveď. Takže keď napíšem zlú, Biblia nemôže klamať. Keď sa spýtame otázku o kapitole 6, Dá ti to
You
odpoveď.
need to ask
Och,
the correct question.
everybody's hearing me. Hear you.
So
Yes, I know. I don't know what
the
to do.
reason we would go to chapter 6 is because we would notice that chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3
Takže šiel mi by...
can be paralleled to Revelation 14. So you can parallel Daniel 1, 2, and 3 with Revelation 14 with the three angels' messages. Elder Terry's already described that. If you're not familiar with that, either go to previous studies or research it yourself. So the way you do that is you look for keywords or links. The word that people have used is hooks.
Can I
So you need
translate
to
now?
find a hook in each story, Daniel and Revelation.
Musíme nájsť v každom príbehu nejaký
To
prepojovací
verify if
článok,
that's correct.
aby sme identifikovali, či je to správne.
Once that's done,
Keď je toto urobené,
then
potom,
this may be slightly harder.
možno
You notice there's a repeat and enlarge in Daniel. And what you notice that chapter 1, 2 and 3 are actually parallel stories of 4, 5 and 6. So then you can do chapter 4, chapter 5 and 6. So if you're not sure about that, you need to study and make sure that you believe or accept that. Once you've reached that stage, you know that chapter 3 is connected to the third angel's message. The third angel's message is regarding the mark of the beast. Depending on your level of aptitude, your interest, there are many things you can do, many paths that you can take to demonstrate for yourself that chapter 3, Revelation 14, the third angel's message, is the Sunday law issue. There are many paths to do that. If you're inexperienced or lazy, you just go to Ellen White and she'll tell you that the story on the plains of Dura is a story of the Sunday law. Or she'll tell you that the mark of the beast and the warning not to receive it is the Sunday law issue. So once you do that, you now know that chapter 6 is the Sunday law subject. So the question you're going to ask Daniel is chapter 6 anything to do with the Sunday law? And if you didn't ask it like that, Daniel would say what? No. It's got nothing to do with Sunday law. It's not that clear to see unless you ask the right question. So once you've done that, you realize that this is a parable, and parables have many elements, and you have to stay on the path. The path is straight and narrow. If you start wandering around and looking at everything, you'll get distracted and not get anywhere. So you start looking at Daniel 6 and you see laws and you see oppression and force. Reminds you of what Ellen White says. There's going to be a law that commands you to do things. So you can imagine that this is a subject of law. And this is the art or the skill to navigate your way through these problems. Because if you're not careful, you will see law here. And as soon as you see law, parallel that with a statue in chapter 3. You're on Adventist ground and there's a Sunday law coming. So it's these teachers, make this all sound very simple. And it's not. It's not simple, I don't think. It's not that intuitive to read chapter 6 and say this has got nothing to do with laws, this is to do with elections. So as you read through the chapter, there are certain things you're going to pick up and certain things you're not going to pick up. Because when we talk about law as an Adventist, what do we imagine? Legality or illegality? What's the framework that we speak about law as an Adventist? In the framework of Daniel 3, Revelation 14, and now 6. We imagine that the US government is going to make illegal laws. So it's all about doing things wrong. So when someone says the story of Daniel 6 is not about illegality, but it's about legality, doing things in accordance with the law, it changes things dramatically. The same issue is in chapter 3. Most of you will think that Nebuchadnezzar is doing something bad. And from bad, you get to not free and not fair. And then you imagine that things are illegal. Until someone says, let's ask a question. Go back 3,000 years. Has what Nebuchadnezzar done, is it legal or illegal? In his context, in his setting. And you're forced to accept the answer that it's legal. Once you can establish that point, then your questions begin to change, and you're able to ask Daniel better questions, and Daniel can give you better answers. So we're not going to spend too much time in all of that. So you know the issue in Daniel 6. It's about rights. It's the right to pray. And even though Elder Terry didn't perhaps go into the detail that you would have liked, she can demonstrate, as can some others, that this subject of praying, this concept of prayer, not the word itself, can be understood as suffrage. So we have now, we have a context that has been placed in the Sunday law setting. We know that everything is legal. We've seen that in 2 chapters now. We've said that it's about the right to pray, and we're going to argue that this is the right for suffrage. So in the religious context, it's the right to pray. In the political context, it's the right to vote. And suffrage can be used in both ways, a religious and a political context. So that's a brief overview that we're going to say that the issue of the Sunday law is not about laws. It's about voting, making decisions, if you want, and the legality or the framework in which those decisions are being made. And you can do all of that same thing then in Daniel 3. And that changes significantly what Daniel 3 means to you. So that's the first one. Second one was January the 6th, which is a harbinger of things to come. So you heard Eleanor present on that this morning. You heard other, I think at least 2 other teachers present on this proof, if I'm going to call it that, this subject. And all of you have some familiarity with 21. And its connection to Panium. So we're all okay at that level. So if we have Panium, this was Raphia, 2021. So from Panium, we're going to talk about the Sunday law. So sometimes people may not see the issue until it's pointed out. So the Sunday law is verse 41, and verse 41 is the King of the North versus the glorious land. think we're all familiar with that or okay with that. Even Ellen White understands that the Sunday law happens in phases. So she won't call it the Sunday law. She'll call it the National Sunday law. Okay with that? The difference between a national Sunday law and a worldwide Sunday law. These are Ellen White concept, not ours. But we agree with that. So we know that this waymark that we're looking at, we're discussing, is something that happens in the United States. And in terms of Daniel 11, it's the King of the North entering into the glorious land. And the problem is that Panium has got nothing to do with that story. So you are forced to put a break in this line, because Panium is the story of the King of the North. That's the same. Versus the King of the South. It's an ancient battle between the two parts of Greece. And there's no glorious land in that story. So you can't connect Panium to the Sunday law. So what we do is we'll say that this is, it can come under different names. We'll call this the formalization, increase of knowledge, and we'll just call this the end. Some people call it the shut door. We know that we can borrow from Ellen White. If you don't like Ellen White, who would you ask? Shout out the name if you don't want to ask Ellen White. Of what I'm about to say next. Not Daniel. Someone said? Not Elder Tess. Not John. Not John. Curtis. Good answer. But the wrong one. How much did you pay him for that? You ask Isaiah. And Isaiah's going to tell you what this waymark is. If you ask me, I call it number 2. And that's number 3. And we won't worry about number 1. Because number 2 is going to explain number 3. So, if you ask Ellen White now, she says, what you see here predicts the future. And she uses the word agitation. So, we say that the agitation at Panium points to the Sunday law. But it doesn't really. So, in one of the 3 classes that we're going to have in the will do what I think it was Daniel that said, we will ask Curtis. So he was correct to explain that. So Curtis is going to explain this. But before he does that, I want you to see that there's a problem, because it was taught that Panium, or January the 6th, is a harbinger of the National Sunday Law. And that needs explaining. It's either considered a poor argument or a wrong argument. So if you didn't understand what I said, understand this. You know Daniel 11 verse 41. It's the story of the glorious land. Don't worry about the Kingdom of the North bit. Panium, in the same chapter, thousands of years before, is a story about a battle between the King of the North and the King of the South. You owe Daniel some money, apparently, Curtis. It's at the back waiting. So, that's all you need to understand. If you don't understand the rest of it. And then, you should be able to see a story between two kingdoms fighting, which have nothing to do with the glorious land, cannot predict the future about the glorious land. Can't predict the glorious land's future. Unless you have a really good model, which is possible in theory, the only way you're going to predict the future of the glorious land is by having a story at number 2 that's about the glorious land. And it just so happens that January the 6th is a story about that. The problem is, January the 6th, which you're all familiar with, how do you know that has enough power? It has enough built within its DNA to have predictive qualities. Because predictive qualities are prophetic issues. Not political ones. So to infer upon January the 6th, to give it prophetic power, that historical event has to be turned into what? Into a waymark. If you can't turn it into a waymark, it doesn't do anything for you. And turning January 6th into a waymark isn't that easy. I suspect it's harder than you think. And the problem is, we all think it's obvious. Because we're so biased in our views of what we think is going to go on and what we expect. Our biases expose us to mistakes, basically. So unless you know how to turn January the 6th into a waymark, can't be used. And the thing is, happens in 2021. We were already told that Panium was in 2021. So it seems so seductively simple to make it Panium. So we're going to show you how to do that. So the next one, Revelation 13 and 17. We'll call it the rise and fall of nations. So that's the generic title, how nations rise and fall. So this is a bigger subject than was shared this week. There are many components to this. I spoke a little bit about this yesterday when I was asked, I can't remember what question I was asked. But part of my answer was, if you remember, who is in control? Who determines 7 kingdoms? So those 7 kingdoms, I'm saying, are being controlled and directed by Satan to reach perfection, to accomplish the destruction of God's kingdom, the overtaking of that. So we know that those 7 kingdoms are all in the statue. They are the statue, if you like. As soon as you say that, people say, well, if that's all Satan's kingdom, how comes the lamb is there? We haven't addressed that question, but it's something that needs to be answered. Because that lamb-like beast isn't in the mountain, and it is not the mountain. But don't let that deter you, worry you, distract you. What you want to understand is that the reason nations fall and then are replaced is because those kingdoms are not good enough to finish the work. That either, whatever it is, Satan has determined that he and his armies are not ready yet. So think about this as refinement. And remember that everybody is a free moral agent with will. Even Satan's agents, they have free will. Satan can't click their fingers and make people jump. So when Satan selects somebody, an individual and a kingdom, and then that kingdom implodes. That means internal destruction. Satan has to start again. This rise and fall isn't this childish Adventist view of things. So you need to understand this proof in those terms. It's far more sophisticated, and you have to realign the purpose of this. Even bad people want good things, don't they? They want the best of life, not the worst. So if you start asking people how things should operate, human beings took them a long time, but they realize that monarchies or kings don't work very well. They wanted different types of government. So the next best thing is the dictator. Because the dictator is of the people. Is that right? Dictators come from the people. So that's a real progressive step to be a dictator compared to a king. Human beings are doing this all by themselves. It's not some satanic thing. Most dictators rise through revolution. And most revolutions start for good reasons. Then humans work out. Dictators aren't actually that different to kings. So then you have different forms of, we'll call, social cultures. Communism, many good points, and whatever you're going to call on the West. It's the bad term, but I'm just going to call it capitalism. So you have different forms of social solutions to kings and dictators. And the one that we kind of gravitate to, or we like using, is we call democracy in its various forms. So when I said dictator, I said of the people. You can also argue that they're by the people. The problem is they don't end up being for the people. So it's that last element, for the people, serve the people, that you end up with this democratic form of society. And Satan can't do anything about that human growth, that desire. So we've got these nations being more perfect, at one level, a better war machine for Satan, and on the other side, whether you're good or bad, godly or satanic, everybody wants a better life. And everybody wants to be treated nicely. And human beings collectively have worked out the best way to do that is through democracy. If you can accept all of that, then you can understand why God will accept working with a king, which is wrong. God is willing to work with a dictator, which is again is wrong. And God's willing to work with a democratic government. Whatever human beings create, God will work with them. And if you can see that, accept that, then you know that Satan has to do the same thing. So even though you can get a lamb-like beast, it's still part of the kingdoms of this world. And there are these two stories going on. Satan perfecting the war machine, and human beings craving and demanding a better life. A more equitable life. Those two things may or may not be in tension, but both kings, God and Satan, have to accept that and deal with it. So if we're okay with that, then what we want to do, if we want to identify what's going to happen at the end of the world, we do that through parabology. Revelation 17 gives us a lot of information, particularly the 5th, 6th and 7th kingdoms. So that's not new. And so what's useful is to understand the rise and fall of previous kingdoms, to understand the rise and fall of the present. So one of the presenters quoted, "If you live by the sword, you die by the sword." In English, there's a saying, "What goes around, comes around." In the East, you will call it karma. So everybody knows what karma is. You pay the price of your actions. We all understand that. So that phrase is used in the context of the 5th kingdom. Desolation, death, shall be poured upon the desolator. Who told you that? Elder Terry. So that's Daniel 9, yes? So we understand that verse. So we know the 5th kingdom how it's going to rise up and how it's going to come to its death. And then we find information about the sixth, and then we need to find information about the seventh. So that is easier said than done. I'll read what Ellen White says. Great Controversy 439, paragraph 3. At this point, another symbol is introduced. I beheld a beast coming up out of the earth, and he looked like a lamb. Chapter 13, verse 11. Both the appearance of the beast and the manner of its rise indicates that it rises in a different way than the preceding symbols. The kingdoms that rose before were beasts of prey, predators, and this is a lamb. They rose with the when the four winds blew upon the sea. In Europe, basically. These are winds of strife, warfare, revolutions. This kingdom, coming up out of the earth, did not overthrow existing powers to rise up. We can read, it says it grew up peacefully. So this is Ellen White's version. If you don't ask the right questions, you won't get the right answer. Because someone's going to say, I thought the United States rose up with some huge revolution killing lots of English people. Let alone the death and carnage of all the millions of Americans that already live there. And the Mexicans. And the Canadians. And the French. It's carnage. And the Spanish. They even stole their name. So it doesn't look good. So the question is this version wrong? Is Ellen White an American nationalist? Or she doesn't know history? And don't we know history? Depending on the question you're asking, the study that you're doing, both answers can be equally valid. So, we've presented here, I think correctly, that the rise of this nation, if we understand the symbols correctly, demand, despite all of those murders that happened, that we understand that the rise of the Sixth Kingdom was done peacefully, and the creation of this kingdom after its independence from slavery was done in a democratic way. peacefully, as Ellen White would say. So once we establish that, how this kingdom rose, we can then understand how it's going to come to its end. And if we were to break some rules, if you went to proof number 2, this one, we see 2021 insurrection, which was basically to take over the government using non-democratic means, failed. It didn't work. So we can develop lines of evidence to discuss the sixth kingdom and its nature and its rise and fall. And therefore, it will tell you how the seventh comes to its rise. The danger in all these studies, even with what I'm doing, is we make things look easy. And we only answer the questions that we want answered. So your work, it's always been your work, is to make sure that the things that we leave out can be left out. For instance, if the fifth kingdom died in agony, how comes the sixth kingdom didn't rise in agony? Because we've argued, if the sixth dies peacefully, the seventh rises or is born peacefully. So you can see here and here, if I just say bad and good, bad and good, I'm going to put good and good. Bad death, good birth. There is such a thing as a good death. Is. The sixth has a good death. And the seventh has a good birth. It doesn't work. This death and birth happen where? In the same place. This death and this birth happen where? In different places. That's why you can do that. The birth of the sixth kingdom happens somewhere else. And so it's legitimate to have that difference. So, Caesar and Pompey is 63 BC. I did this one yesterday, I think, so I'm not going to go through that. And the last one is the fight between the king of the north and the king of the south. And this is the story of Quintus Fabius Maximum Gurgis. We'll call this the flood. This is the one that Aaron disagrees with. And hopefully tomorrow he'll explain why. So, what was done was to take this person out of their historical context, ignore the word maximum, because it really doesn't do anything, and take those three names and separate them and only look at the two. Fabius Gurgis. And then run through all of that as I did yesterday, because we can see this is the flood, and we can see that this is vote 538 Sunday law. So there are some issues with this, disagreements, especially when we talk about Quintus, number 5, 5th month, which is for us the 7th month, and you can work out all the intricacies of that and get to July. Some people find that illegal, and the other issue that people have is the year 272, or sorry, yep, I thought that's looking wrong. 272 or 273. Where does this person fit in the context or a structure? So there are many questions about this person and their influence on our Sunday law message. And because we're so nice, we say, if you don't like Quintus, we'll do it a different way. And we won't even worry about 272, 273 if you don't like that. Because some of us, I think all of us, most of us, have got an understanding that we can demonstrate what the correct date is without using all of these things that people are objecting to. So, if you're one of those people that don't like Quintus, we'll try to answer those questions. But If we answer the question, that you get to the same place as you would have done using quintus, you're forced, if you agree with the argument that we'll use, you're then forced to accept quintus as being correct. Just letting you know that. And that's it. I've run out of time. There's many more details to all of this that we can and need to discuss. But we won't have time at this camp. We have 3 meetings left now. Out of those 3 meetings, Aaron's going to take a section. Curtis is going to take a section. And so we'll have 2 and a bit of classes left. I've got several questions. But if we do take any questions off the floor, or if you haven't asked your questions, ask questions that are really going to make a difference for you. They're going to help you to accept or reject certain pieces of truth. Don't waste your questions. Just want to ask a question. This is a question that I received. I can't remember the details of it. It's like ... Acts 27 is the line of institutions. So we've all imbibed that. And my question to you is, what does that even mean? It's the line of institution. Because if I do this line, what is this the line of? What's this the line of? So this is the line of the 144,000. And what is the 144,000? Is it an institution? So if that's an institution, and we do some fractal magic, the line of the priests, Levites, and Nephilim are lines of institutions. So don't ask redundant questions. Ask good ones. Ones that are good. They're all good questions, but I mean ones that are really going to make the difference. It just shows you how easy it is to have these funny ideas. If this is the line of institutions, what's that telling you? Show me the line of people. The line of the individuals. You'll find there isn't one. You'll find that there isn't one. So it's inappropriate to call the line of Acts 27 the line of institutions. It's like a tautology, it's a redundant statement. Because they're all lines of institution. And the reason you said that is because maybe, depending on who you are, maybe until now, you thought this line was a line of 1,440,000, 1.4 million, I think, people, which means it's a line of how many people? One person. You think this is your line because people say, where's my 1989? I came in 2017. You ever heard that question? That person thinks this is the line of the individual. And there's never been a line of an individual, I don't believe, except some theoretical one. And if that's true, you need to completely reimagine how salvation works. Because there is no individual line of salvation anymore. If it's the death of the United States, and this is the creation of the movement, they're all about salvation. There is no line of personal salvation. And that should worry you if you haven't understood that before. And I think that's the next thing that this movement's going to have to deal with. That we will be dealing with, is being dealt with now. So book your place for next year. Let's pray. Holy God, we thank you that step by step, despite our independence and free will, you are going to save a movement. You are going to create an organization, an environment, a culture that reflects your will, your character. May each of us desire to enter into that place, to be part of that kingdom, so that we can be safe. In Jesus' name, amen. For those online,